the Chapel Dweller is the Sin character, because it's like, bring everyone here. Erden Chapel is like your YouTube channel, and you're just inviting people in.
Everyone, come on, it's nice here.
Yeah.
And the narrow-minded man is that one person who leaves me in comments and tells you how to run your channel.
Yes, yeah. And he's like, actually. We were talking about this last night in preparation, and you said, like, what's the narrow-minded man's cut dialogue? And I said, which version of him? And you didn't know there were two.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because the thing is, the narrow-minded man NPC that we rescue and send to Erden Chapel by sending somewhere else has, like, a couple of cut lines. They're not significant or anything. It's just like they cut this because it was redundant information. But there is a whole cut NPC who has the same voice actor and kind of gives you the same attitude. So it's like that was an early version of him that was removed and replaced with the one we have now. So there's kind of 1.5 narrow-minded, like 2.5 men. There's 1.5 narrow-minded men.
Why did they remove the other one?
Well, he's from the very early draft of the story that doesn't sync up with the one we have now. So his dialogue wasn't usable.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, the prompts are to ask him about... Okay, here's who he was. He would be a window NPC. We don't know where he would be. Lance thinks he would have been where the old woman is now, like in that house.
Mm-hmm.
He once, by complete chance, appeared in an alpha test someone did. He was behind a wall, but he wasn't supposed to be behind the wall. What happened, this is according to Lance. The reason Lance thinks he is there is because they basically just moved him away from a window, because they didn't want a player to accidentally activate him. So they just changed his coordinates, but I guess like they were off slightly, and his coordinates ended up somewhere where it was just about possible to make his dialogue trigger by standing near a wall. And that was found by someone doing a Japanese network test. And the only evidence we had of it was they took a photograph of their actual monitor when it happened. So we didn't have a clean screenshot. We just had this weird photograph of this prompt near a wall, and we didn't understand what it was. But it showed up. We figured out it was that narrow-minded man NPC. And he's from an alpha version of the story that we didn't get. And what happens is, he initially just tells you, like, he's the standard Yarnamite character, and he's like, get out of here, and outside, or they're going to kill you. And then if you talk to him enough, he says, okay, I'll tell you information if you bring me blood. Which is something that the Yarnamites don't actually do in the finished game, but you would have to give him blood. So you would, like, in the way the game works now is you gave him blood echoes. He takes 350 blood echoes to make him talk, but we don't know if in that version of the script they were called blood echoes. It may actually just have been blood. Like, you may have leveled up with actual blood. So it's possible you were giving him, like, physical blood. So you talk to him, you give him the echoes, and then he will tell you about... You get 2 prompts, which are ask about Lawrence and ask about Blood of a Sage. And obviously neither of those show up in the finished game, so that's presumably why they didn't recycle him, because he's not... Like, nothing he says is relevant to what we ended up with. But it's the same voice actor as the narrow-minded man, and he gives you the same kind of, like, skeptical attitude that the narrow-minded man does.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like an early version of that character, yeah.
And when he tells you about the blood of a sage, what do you think that's referring to? What's the sage?
Okay, so the other blood of a sage prompt you get is from the old woman NPC who eventually became Yasefka.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask her about blood of a... She has exactly the same prompts, which are ask about Lawrence and ask about blood of a sage.
Okay.
And they're the two... And both of them say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what blood of a sage is. So what I think happened was the handwritten scroll in the very, very first version of the story that we have, would have been a note left by Lawrence. And it would have said, seek the blood of a sage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you have the option to ask about the blood of a sage, because it would have been the equivalent of pale blood. Like, it's the thing that you're seeking out, and presumably Lawrence may have been looking for the blood of a sage or something. Like, he would have left you a note that says, like, either seek the blood of a sage or I am seeking the blood of a sage or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same kind of MacGuffin as pale blood, where, like, you could just ask, well, what's the blood of a sage? And they'll all just say, I don't know, I've never heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you ask them about Lawrence, they just say that the narrow-minded man just says Lawrence went to the cathedral. Basically. So he's just directing you to go to the Grand Cathedral.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's like a combination of the narrow-minded man and Gilbert, where he tells you where to go at the beginning of the game, but he's, unlike Gilbert, he's very kind of aggressive and surly, and he doesn't seem to like you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, blood of a sage.
Blood of a sage.
What do you think that's referring to? What do you think it's referring to?
Well, the thing is, like, pale blood doesn't refer to an actual kind of blood. It refers to the sky.
Mm-hmm. Like the color of the sky when the red moon is out?
Yeah. They talk about pale blood, meaning when the red moon happens, the sky turns a weird shade of pinkish blue, and that is called a pale blood sky because it looks like the way a body looks if you drain it of blood. Like, if you see a body without blood in it, it loses its red tinge, and it just becomes this, like, yeah, like a pale purplish color. So that's why it's called the pale blood sky. It's not an actual kind of blood. And that's why every time you ask someone who knows anything about Yharnam, about pale blood, they say, I don't know what this is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not actually a kind of blood, regardless of what people keep saying. There's no actual substance called pale blood.
Mm-hmm.
Except in the Bloodborne comic, which isn't canon for many reasons. Yeah. So, blood of a sage presumably is an actual kind of blood, I guess.
Or is it?
Well, the thing is, pale blood works as a description because, like, pale blood. I don't know what blood of a sage could refer to in any other sense. Like, it looks like that was maybe a central mystery of the early version of the story, but we never...
Mm-hmm.
Our understanding of that plot ends roughly around the cathedral, so we don't really know what would have happened at Byrgenwerth, or any point after that, in this Blood of a Sage story. It could be like Blood of a Wise Man or something. Like, that's the word they use.
Mm-hmm.
There is there's a novel called Wise Blood.
Oh, yeah?
But I don't think it's a reference to that.
Who wrote it?
Flannery O'Connor.
I don't know who that is.
Well, I don't think, they probably didn't. It is about, like, Catholicism and religion and stuff, but I don't think anyone on the design team read it.
Well, maybe they did.
Oh, and well, it's about eyes as well. So the main character blinds himself at the end.
That seems pretty relevant. Why have you been keeping this from me?
Well, because it's not really anything to do with Bloodborne. It's a book about a...
It has eyes, it has blood, it has everything to do with Bloodborne?
Yeah, but people have eyes and blood as well. Like, in general.
In general? In general, we have blood.
It's about God, I can't believe I'm doing this. It's about a guy who has a crisis of faith after he lives through World War II, and he goes back to his hometown, and then he realizes there's nothing left for him, so he leaves, goes to the city, and he becomes a street preacher who founds his own church, which is called the Church Without Christ. And it's just about him grappling with his relationship toward Christ, and then at the end of it, he blinds himself and starts, like...
Mm.
He meets a fake preacher who claims to have blinded himself as a test of faith, and then he discovers the preacher isn't actually blind. He was faking it to...
Oh.
He was faking it so then he, to sort of prove a point, blinds himself, literally.
Damn.
And then he starts...
That's intense.
he starts sort of recreating, like, biblical tortures on himself by, like, wrapping himself in barbed wire and things.
Oh.
Yeah, and then at the end he dies. It's nothing to do with Bloodborne.
Or does it?
What?
Or does it?
It doesn't.
Well, you don't know. What else can we say about the narrow-minded man?
Well, he's a narrow. That's his name. He's a man. He is narrow-minded. He does nothing. He's an infuriating character because he is the hardest fucking character to recruit. You have to continuously ask at his window in a way that you kind of don't have to with other Yanamites.
Yeah.
Then you have to tell him to go to the opposite place you want him to go to. And when he arrives, he does nothing. He sits in an alcove and he has a ton of dialogue, but it's all wrong, intentionally. Everything he says is the opposite of what is true. And, like, it sounds like that could be the opening for something. Like, oh, if you know this guy is wrong and you do the opposite of what he says, something will happen. But nothing happens. Mm-hmm. He is just telling you things that aren't true. There's a line where he says something like, "Your lies spin a web," and people were like, is this a reference to the spiders? He says, like, I know everything, but I didn't learn it from books, I learned it from my own mind. He says it toward the end when the red moon happens and everyone starts going crazy. He starts ranting about how he just instinctively knows everything and he doesn't matter. Everyone else is saying things, but they're all wrong. He just understands.
He has an
intuitive understanding of Yharnam. It's incredible how much dialogue he has and how it's literally entirely pointless. My favorite is when he's like, "Beware the lady of the night." What does she do? She literally just sits in a chair the entire time. Beware.
He talks shit about the beggar, too.
That's the thing. He talks shit about what happens is, this is why everything he says is wrong. It's kind of clever, but ultimately pointless because it doesn't go anywhere. Which is like, He says, beware, he tells you to be very wary of Ariana because she's not holy like Adela is. And that plays out with Adela killing Ariana because actually Adela was the crazy one and Ariana was the nice one. And then he's like, beware the beggar because he thinks he's better than everyone. And actually the beggar is the only nice one.
Yeah.
But like, I get it, but like, so what? Like, this doesn't do anything or go anywhere. It's just like, it doesn't... It's presented like it's a clue or something, but it all happens anyway. I don't quite understand what function he has.
So when the suspicious beggar comes to town, is he like, "Hey, that's my son, bro. We can trust him"?
I don't know what he says about that because I always just kill the beggar in Forbidden Woods.
Oh, let's see. Let's check. By let's check, I mean you should check the dialogue. Like now, Richard?
Okay, I'll check. I'll ask Meph. Okay. The dialogue I wrote down. Oh God, hurry up, Chrome. Okay. Dialogue reference. The best part about the narrow-minded man in the alpha is that we just have his dialogue in just a big file, and there's no pauses, because I guess that would have taken up extra space. So if you listen back to it, he talks really... It sounds like he's rapping. He talks really... Or like he's in a Guy Ritchie movie. It's like really, really, really fast. Oh yeah, it says here in his old... The version that we ended up getting, the one who goes to Erden, has cut dialogue where he says, "Give me blood and I'll forgive you." So maybe he was a merchant. And that's what he was. He says, like, "Wait a minute, I'm in a generous mood. Give me blood and I'll forgive your lies and deceit." So maybe you could buy stuff from him. Maybe he sold pungent blood cocktails. Yeah, and he says, like, "Enough of this, I'm short on blood." Yeah.
Okay, but what does he say about the suspicious beggar?
He says... beware the blind man. I guess that's the beggar.
So then he's right for once.
No, I mean the beggar in Erden Chapel.
Oh, I mean, I'm talking about the suspicious beggar. Isn't that
I
what
don't think he's
called?
mentioned. Yeah, but he's not mentioned.
Well, that's a problem. Somebody needs to go back and patch that up.
I think it's a bit late for that.
3 years later. Patch up the narrow-minded man's dialogue.
Yeah, that's the one thing they'll patch. They'll do Bloodborne Remastered. It'll be the same game with much worse particle effects, much worse lighting, but they fix the narrow-minded man's dialogue. Yeah, his other cut line is he tells you to beware the old woman.
What does she do? She doesn't do anything, though.
No, she can get you sedatives if you ask her for sedatives.
No, I mean, she doesn't do anything bad.
That's the whole point. Everyone he tells you to beware is not doing...
I know.
I guess that's why he never mentions the suspicious beggar, because the suspicious beggar is actually dangerous.
Maybe he's just like a really big shit talker, and he's like, oh crap, the suspicious beggar is dangerous, I better keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
Maybe in the remaster of Bloodborne, what they can do is the narrow-minded man starts talking shit about the chapel dweller.
Yeah.
But then the chapel dweller goes like beast mode, like what Santa found in the hidden content, and just beats up the narrow-minded man.
Let's make narrow-minded man characters for co-op and just not do anything. Every time we get summoned, just be like, oh, another outsider. And then just immediately leave. Actually, no. Here's an interesting thing about him with regard to his cut lines.
Mm-hmm.
You know when he says the way you recruit him is that you recruit Ariana, and then he says oh, I see you told her where the shelter is, right? That's how you get him. But in his card dialogue, he says, oh, I see you told the old hag about the shelter, which implies he would have been near the old woman. You would have told her about the shelter. Yeah, not Ariana. So I guess either Ariana or he were in a different place originally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because, they're all at window, so they could just swap them wherever they wanted, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Why don't we tell Gilbert about the chapel?
Because he can't walk.
Why don't we take him there? We're strong.
Well, that's a good point. When you meet Gilbert, he says he's too sick to walk or get out of bed. So
yeah, well, listen, my character can wield a 5,000-pound Ludwig Holy Blade. Okay, I'm pretty sure he could carry Gilbert to the chapel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how would you compare him to Yorshka?
I like him a lot more than Yorshka because while Yorshka does do something, you have to grind on Silver Knights for an entire long weekend before she'll do it. And the thing she gives you is only useful if you're trying to get the platinum. Narrow-minded man is completely irrelevant character who you can choose to recruit. And you can get other things out of him. You can feed him to the beggar and he'll give you beast blood pellets. And if you send him to Yosefka's clinic, you get a pungent blood cocktail. So that's more uses than Yorshka has.
Also, I read in Math's wiki that if Santa's first refugee into Odin Chapel in Cathedral Ward, he will reward you with triumph gesture.
But isn't that every
Oh, is it? I don't know.
The first character you send to Erden Chapel, you always get triumph. It doesn't matter who it is.
Oh, really? Well, at least he's consistent. At least he's not I give you nothing.
I would love it if you got triumph just for that guy in the Erden Chapel door. I was like, yes!
That's how I pictured it when I read this.
Do you want to talk about how his face is completely fucked up?
Yeah, I saw that. What's up with that?
There's a hidden feature you can't access it, but the character creator does have the ability to make faces completely asymmetrical. So you can have, like, half the face can be, like, distorted and like, going down or up in, like, a sort of twisted way. And I think, like, the idea is that's similar to the way the Yharnamites all have asymmetrical limbs. Like, they all have one arm that's longer than the other. The idea is that because they've been taking all this old blood, like, they're becoming asymmetrical. So I guess similar to, like, Ludwig's head, how that's, like, half a human and half a horse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, like, yeah, it's you could act, if they re-enabled that, you could do that to characters you created, but they like, it's in there, but they just disable you being able to do it on the character creation screen. So maybe like Lance will figure out a hack or something, and you'll be able to do that to your own characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why do you think he is the way he is?
All the Yharnamites are like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked a little about that in the podcast we did with Herbert.
Yeah.
On the Healing Church.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he can actually survive the night in the chapel.
Yeah. Yeah. Him, the old woman, and depending on what you do, like, Adela can survive.
But you said that everybody in Yharnam dies.
Well, there's
those people who don't turn to beasts die. That's what you said.
Okay, I think they turn into beasts unless they're in Erden Chapel, because I guess Erden Chapel has the incense is, like, helping them somehow.
Okay, so not everyone dies.
No, there's, like, 3 survivors.
Well, there
so
you
it's
go.
Incorrect to say everyone died.
Thank you.
We'll say everyone died, and then Neil deGrasse Tyson will reply to the tweet, actually, 3 survived.
This is... what podcast did you say it in? You said it in a podcast that I haven't edited yet.
Good.
So it's like time is going backwards, like in the DLC, you know?
Yeah.
Eventually we'll get to the very first podcast we recorded. And the stuff that he wears, is that just standard Yharnamite getup?
Yes.
Can our character wear that?
Yeah, you find it in the lower part of Yharnam in those alleyways.
Hmm.
And, like, it's weird that you would find it because it doesn't really have a point.
Fashion?
No, what I think, right, is that in the early builds that Lance has been showing off, there is a thing called the Yharnam Spy set.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, if you collect it, it's got icons, but it's the icons that literally every armor set has those icons in the network test TGS thing. Like, they're just like a default armor set icon that everything has. So mm-hmm. I think probably the Yharnam Spy set might have been the Yharnam attire and the rumpled hat that you find in that part of Yharnam. The idea being that Healing Church people disguise themselves as Yharnamites to spy on people.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they pick that up again with Simon in the DLC by saying that, like, very explicitly, members of the Healing Church dress as beggars to mm-hmm. sort of walk around unnoticed. So I think the Yharnam Spy set was probably that. And it would sort of make sense to put it at the beginning of the game because it's not useful. Like, yeah, because you find the Hunter's set, which is good. And then I guess maybe giving you 2 armor sets that early in the game, they didn't like the idea of. So they give you, like, the good... You would have got the Blood Hunter of Gremia set, and then, like, the Yharnam Spy set later on. The Yharnam Spy set later on just would have been, like, a bad armor set, but it fills in some details about the world.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Well, I think we pretty much covered the narrow-minded man.
What a great character. Just the degree of bullshit that you have to go through to rescue him. Then when you do, he gives you nothing and is completely ungrateful about it. And I don't know if, like, is that a deliberate thing they threw in there? To just, like, fuck with you? Or... I don't know, we haven't dug up, like, we have all of his dialogue, including the stuff that was cut out. And there's no dialogue that hints he would have actually done anything.
Okay. So, when we recorded the Edgar podcast...
I remember that one. That went very well.
Yeah, because I asked you if we could do like some fast and easy lore so I can edit it, release it, and rest a little bit.
Yeah, how long do you have? Because it's only 2 p.m. here, so I can go for another, like 16 hours, probably.
No, we want the opposite of that, Richard.
All right.
That's why I picked the narrow-minded man. It's like, now we're gonna do it right. We're gonna do a fast, easy lore right with the narrow-minded man.
But he's not that... Continue.